To start with, does Russian gas really put the pressure on high offices in Europe, and what kind of pressure it is?
Obviously, it used to, but during the recent year, that pressure has been lowered significantly. In my view, Europe still needs huge amounts of energy supplies, including natural gas. It is still dependent on, its economy is still dependent on those energy supplies, and they managed to solve partially the issue and find some alternative routes of supplies. And certainly the share of Russia on the European gas market has decreased significantly. But strategically, there is still a problem because, in my view, Europeans are paying a heavy price for the Russian-Ukrainian war. Their economy has been stagnating during 2022. And probably that's partly an answer to the question of why Europe is overcoming its dependence on the Russian gas. But nobody knows how big the dependence would be after economic recovery in Europe. So this is going to be a long-playing issue in European capitals. They will be looking for natural gas, liquefied natural gas or just natural gas, in order to replace supplies from Russia. And there are doubts if they can succeed in that, because huge amounts of liquefied natural gas in particular have been contracted by China, and there is a high level of competition on the market. So this is a huge political, geopolitical and security issue for Europe, continues to be.
Right. After the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, and very much thanks to all the sanctions against Russia, European countries significantly reduced the dependence on Russian gas from 40% in pre-war stage to 10% by now. It's huge, by all means. Alfred Kammer, himself director of the European Department of the International Monetary Fund, states that, according to him, the European market is now increasingly filled with alternative Russian gas supplies. In particular, it concerns the supply of liquefied natural gas LNG to Europe via sea. Kammer says that financial ties with Russian economy remain very limited and are shrinking further. So when do you think this will cease to be completely, or to put it straight and forward, that complete financial and economic cut-off for Russia? Is that even possible after all? And should we really be striving for it? What's the consequences for the both sides, in your opinion?
Well, from the very beginning, when the policy of sanctions started to be applied towards Russia in 2014, it was the question of who is paying the heavier price, because there is obviously an interdependence, and both sides are paying. And methodologically, it is very difficult to assess the impact of sanctions. It has been there have been numerous attempts to do that since 2014. And they all have been problematic because there are many things which actually impact the economic performance of Russia. And it is difficult to distinguish for which part of that sanctions are responsible. But what is more or less clear after the more than a year of the war is that the Russian economy is quite resilient, and it has been overcoming almost the whole negative effect of the Western sanctions. And the sanctions are unable to impose a price over Russia high enough to stop its aggressive policies. And moreover, sanctions are not enough to cause a deep economic crisis in Russia as well. It seems to me that the Russian economy has been adapting to the regime of sanctions, becoming poorer, becoming a little bit, or probably not a little bit, but more simple, on a simple level. But it has been stabilized, and it now looks probably is following the path of the economy of Iran, which is under sanctions for more than 40 years. A country which is large, its economy is also heavily relying on energy resources, supplies, and they have been somehow used to live under the sanctions regime, and that's something Russia will probably emulate. And moreover, it is impossible, as it turned out, to cut such a large economy as Russia's from the global economy by only taking steps from the part of the West, because there are also other major power centers in the world, China, India. The world is no longer Western-centered, I would say. And because of that, we can say about half or semi-isolation of Russia, but not of a complete isolation. I think that complete isolation is out of reach.
So, to put it clear, are you actually telling me that sanctions simply are not doing its job? They are not working, is what you literally telling?
What I'm telling is that Russia turned out to be well prepared for the sanctions, just the way Ukraine turned out to be well prepared for a full-scale invasion and for a large-scale conventional war. Just in the same way, Russia turned out to be prepared for the economic war of sanctions, much better than the West has expected, and we have to deal with the consequences of that.